Hey everybody, welcome to today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Andy Polk with FDRA. This is a webinar that's powered by Centric software, provider of PLM, but also more, I would say more than PLM. We've got Matt on today who is from the industry itself. And so I think it's a lot of thoughtful ways about how to optimize workflows and optimize operations. I'll tell you right off the bat, we're recording this, so we will post this later in case you missed anything and want to go back and check it out or pass it around to your colleagues. Feel free. As we go through the presentation today, please go ahead and down at the very bottom there is a Q&A box. So in the Q&A box, if something pops up that you have a question about, go ahead and insert that so you don't forget it. We will get to those questions at the end of the day to cover that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the start. So today's focus on our webinar really is around the power of 3D design and transformation. So it really is around like how you change your sampling process and how you change your workflows at the very start in the ideation of footwear, and what kind of optimization you can get from that, both in terms of ROI. And we'll go through it today, but there is a ton of benefits from engaging with customers, changing things on the fly very quickly, etc. So again, we'll get into that. I've introduced myself, Andy Polk with FDRA, but we have two great guests today. One is Andrew with Vizu, and then Matt with Centric Software. If you've done a webinar with us in the past, Matt's been on many of these. But Andrew, as we start off, I just quickly love for you to introduce yourself. And then Matt, and then we'll get into Centric and Vizu.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, my name's Andrew Bougie. I'm with Vizu. I manage the Americas for them. Vizu is based in Germany. So I manage this region. I'm based out of Greenville, South Carolina.
Greenville, nice.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so for those of you I haven't met, my name is Matt Nachri. I am the Western North America sales manager for Centric. Been doing that about 9 years, but as Andy mentioned, prior to that, I do come from the footwear industry. I spent about 4.5 years in operations at Crocs, where I learned unbelievable amount of how to do things and try to incorporate that as I go forward. And we've been pretty successful with that. As Andy said, if you haven't been to these before, we do like questions, put them in the chat. We'll get to them at the end because we like to answer those things specifically. So a little review on what PLM is. And of course, I'm going to talk about how cool Centric is while we do that. But what I like to say with product lifecycle management software is we replace chaos. So one of my catchphrases, or all of our catchphrases, is the single source of truth, right? You're designing footwear, apparel, cars, anything. You've got a bunch of people working really hard on very specific tasks. And those people are likely using Vizu, Adobe Illustrator, SolidWorks, Browseware, whatever you have Adobe Illustrator is the big one for almost everybody. It's almost universal. And the really universal one is Excel. And everybody's using these tools. Pre-COVID, they were in different offices, different floors. Now we don't even know where people are, right? So creating a single source of truth, once you have two sources of truth, two spreadsheets in two different offices, then you don't know what the right answer is. So that's what we do. We bring it all together. We get rid of this chaos and give you a globally accessible single source of truth. So you can go to the next one. This is a lot of talk about why people want a PLM system, and it's standardization and getting to market faster. That's what it all boils down to. And you see those numbers. These are not our numbers. They're from Gartner research. This is what people are trying to do. This is part of the digital transformation. So let's jump to the next one real quick, Andy. And so how do I know all this? I know this because we've been doing this a long time. We're very proud of this slide. Hopefully some of you are on this slide or will be soon, but we have globally, it's much more than 725 now. It's almost 800 customers and well over 12,500 brands currently being managed in Centric. And we like to be very careful that once someone is a customer, they stay a customer. And you can see these columns. These brands are listed by when they started using Centric. They're all still using Centric. we consider these partnerships very, very valuable to us. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today, because as we drive digital transformation with Centric, we're working very closely with Vizu and Andrew and those guys. So that's where we are. That was a whirlwind.
Yeah.
But let's get
I
into
would
it.
say too, Centric, if you talk to people, Centric will talk about the ease of use of PLM and implementation. Not that it's easy, but it's more intuitive than others. And you get folks like Matt to work with you who have done this for footwear companies, meaning you're not turned over to a sales rep who is selling cookie cutter software. You're working with someone who actually understands what your problems are and how to optimize that. Before we jump into the conversation today, which is going to be fantastic, some of you may not know Vizu and what they do. And so, Andrew, if you want to bring up your slide deck, you can just quickly introduce Vizu and so the work that you guys do for footwear companies as well.
Let me unmute myself there. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, so Vizu is a German company that was founded in 2013 with the main goal of democratizing material digitization. So basically what we do is we take physical materials and turn them into digital materials for use in various digital workflows, mainly 3D workflows, which we'll be discussing today. But yeah, so everything that we've developed over the years is with the end goal of making material digitization fast, easy, and consistent. If we get into the specifics of what we actually do, we develop hardware and software for digitizing materials. So we offer that technology. We offer implementation support. So obviously, if you pick up one of our systems, then we'll train you on the system. We talk through your workflows to make sure that everything's being plugged in properly, maybe look through, see how we can make things more efficient with you. So we can talk through all those processes. And then, of course, we offer services as well, whether it's, maybe you're just getting started with the digitalization process and you want to just try digitizing some materials for a pilot or something like that, or we have some clients who are just hands off and want us to take care of digitize all their materials for them. So we offer that as well. And then finally, we also like to mention that we have over 400 clients globally. You'll probably recognize a lot of brands here on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, of course, we are working with a lot of supply chain clients as well. So the fabric mills and all of that. So no matter who it is, if they're looking to turn a physical material into a digital material, we can help with that.
And you know what, I'm going to interrupt you, Andrew, but you know what I love about that slide is
Yeah.
I've got friends on the left side and the right side, right?
Yeah.
So as we are talking about, and I love how you say democratizing this process, that's been one of our goals as well. And I think that's what brought the two companies together, is that you're doing all this great work on both the brand and the supply chain side, creating this truth about materials. And that's our goal too, is to bring that truth into a single source of truth. So I love seeing the slide because it's like, oh yeah, I know that guy. I know that guy. I know that guy. It makes it kind of fun.
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. All right. So let's get into it then. I think one of the big challenges we face as an industry is, we have a product that is very hands-on still when it's produced. It's multifaceted, 60 materials minimum or an average, number of hands going down and touching it. And so when you start looking at optimizing things in the factory, it's harder, I think, to find an ROI than in the front of the design process where you're still trying to create what you're making and I think really use collateral to talk to customers that you have to get to figure out, should you even make this? Is it going to be valuable? Is there going to be demand for it? And so I think that's where 3D is really impactful. But I'll throw it to you, Andrew. And the first one is when people are thinking about 3D for their company, where's the best place to start with that process or that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the best place to start. So I guess if we're looking at it from the business standpoint, maybe we have a company that's just not doing any 3D work yet, right? And they have to pick a department, let's say, to start in, right? Because maybe they want marketing assets, or they want to make some configurators or something like that, right? You could start in those departments, but we always recommend to start with the design side of things. So start at the beginning, where your product is coming from. We'll get into, of course, all the benefits of 3D in the design process. But the bottom line is, if you start in the design process with 3D, the assets that you get out of that can then be utilized everywhere else. Because we do have, for example, we do have clients that don't start in the design process. Maybe they don't have buy-in from the design team or something, right? But their marketing team wants assets to do just some really cool things that you can do with CGI and stuff like that these days, right? So they take their physical products they've already produced. Some of them will 3D scan them, and then they model on top of that, right? Basically reverse engineering their own product. And you can do that, and that's fine. But again, if you start at the beginning there with design, then you have those assets going forward for everywhere else, and every part of the company can reap the benefits.
Yeah. And so basically what you're saying is you're going through the whole process, and then you're breaking it down and going back to where you should have started with at the very beginning. From a VSU standpoint, when you're scanning the materials in, how important, there's a lot of different software out there. Even Adobe now is having like 3D tools and things like that, where you can design in these different softwares, but you guys in particular scan the materials so that it goes in and you're actually looking at what should be produced at the factory, not a generic material type that you pull from somewhere, right? So maybe explain the value of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a lot of different solutions out there for creating a digital material. We have people taking photos with their cell phones, or just like a random DSLR, or using a flatbed scanner. You can do all of that. And then you do Adobe Substance comes up a lot, right? Where people are taking these photos and they say you can just ingest photos from these random places and then create digital materials. And you can get some good results. But if you want a true digital twin, we haven't mentioned that word yet, but if you want that true digital twin, you want that to be the exact same thing that a customer or the manufacturer or the internal people who are reviewing a design, you want that to be exactly the same as if you had a physical version. And that's what we do. We take the actual physical material, we digitize all the visual aspects of it, that surface structure, the reflectivity, transparency, if it has those factors, right? If you have meshes, all of those aspects are captured and reproduced digitally exactly how they should be, so that you have that accurate version. So it's all about accuracy, and our system does it very, very rapidly as well.
Well, I think that if you don't do it, basically what you're saying is you could take what we currently do now for a lot of companies, where they sketch something out, used to fax it. Now they email it over to the factory.
Yeah.
The factory prototypes it and says, I'm looking at a 2D image and I'm hoping this is what the 3D actual thing looks like. I'll ship it to you. Somebody's taking Post-it notes and sticking it and shipping it back, right? So that's where most companies are at. If they start to use scanning and like basic tools, they can get a little bit better, but you're still guessing. And I can't imagine anything worse, and Matt can speak to this, I can't think anything worse of somebody coming with an idea and then coming back and being completely different than what they thought, and how frustrating that is, and how important it is to have it done right from the start. And Matt, I'll bring you into this conversation too, because I think the other part of that too is like, it's a lot of data points going back and forth in your supply chain, even for, we always talk about supply chain in terms of getting product in on a boat, but this is a digital supply chain at the front that, most people don't realize has to flow through somewhere to make sense.
Yeah, most people don't think about that, right? All shoes are data until they're a shoe, right? So you start with a concept and a design and a brief, and then materials. And that's, awesome if you have 3D scan materials through Visu in the system, because not only do you have an accurate representation of how these materials are going to drape, how they're going to reflect light, what they're going to look like, you can start calculating usage from the very beginning. Like, not, I've been doing this for 30 years and I think it's going to use this much per shoe, but no, here's the calculation. This is how much it's going to use. So how much, what kind of position do we need to take? Just the really nuts and bolts part of developing a product. And so, building on that a little bit, one of the things we like to do, and I said before, we create this single source of truth. And one of the things that brought Centric together with Visu is that we do have so many customers in common that we've got customers going down that 3D virtual twin path now, where they're starting with the material scans and they have libraries of these. And then as the developers and designers are working, and so you can have designers working in another tool. Adobe Illustrator is ubiquitous, right? But they could be using Browseware, all kinds of other things. Romans CAD, I'm not trying to sell other softwares, but there's a million of them out there. We always say we're agnostic with who we integrate with. The tool providers that we really see a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of cohesiveness with, which is not the word I was looking for, but it'll come to me later. Like Visu, we actually build integrators so that the person scanning the material, that material automatically shows up with all the physics and everything involved in Centric. So the designers have access to that from the very beginning. And if you can cut one round of samples out, I still, from my days doing this, which is now over 10 years ago, remember exactly what the FedEx charge on one sample was in the development cycle. And if you can go from 5 cycles to 4 to 3, you're looking at real money real quickly, and more importantly, real time, because you're not waiting for that 2-week FedEx from Asia to show up, and you open the box and Andy, it's not a nightmare, it's daily SOP. Opening the box saying, well, this is not what I said, throw it out, call them up. Right? If you can avoid one round like that, the ROI just, it's phenomenal.
Okay, and we were throwing out this term digital twin. So I think we should define that a little bit, because I think maybe some people hear that. It's used across the 3D industry, really, what this digital twin idea is. And so, Andrew, I'll kick that to you to kind of flesh out a little bit to explain what exactly a digital twin is, and we can get into a little bit more about the reason why that's important. Yeah,
absolutely. So a digital twin, it is a buzzword, but it's also it's very descriptive, right? So it's a digital, or supposed to be a digital exact copy of that physical product that you are trying to either show to someone for review, communicate for manufacturing, or for selling to a client or something, right? Selling out into the world. So again, it should be that an exact copy, so that important decisions can be made across the board, whether it's the design decisions, like Matt was saying with when you're prototyping, reducing the number of samples and back and forth, reducing those errors, right? And also you want it to be exactly the same as the physical product, because if you are using that in a configurator or something else, and a customer is using that to make a purchase decision, and then they get the physical one and it doesn't look anything like it, right? Like, oh, these materials are completely different, or the shape's wrong, or whatever. So just that's the bottom line definition, I think, of a digital twin.
That's good, because I think that's the important part, is because we have been used to taking pictures of shoes and putting it on the internet of a physical copy, and that's typically what the consumer is going to get. But we're in this like artificial age now, right? And there's all these things, and who knows what's digital and what's not. But that's the point, is like, if you're it's your brand equity at stake if you don't do this correctly. And also I would say, this lies in, and having a digital twin provides you the ability to test your product before you make it. And I said it earlier, but that is so important now to say, how much demand can I actually have around this? And this is both in terms of, some people use it where they'll throw it out on social media. Some people may do a Kickstarter. If you're a startup, that's fine. Some people may run it through something like a First Insight where they can do testing and pricing and things like that, depending on how far along you are. But I think that's, it's really important, I think, for having accuracy in what people are looking at to make decisions and purchases. And I think it's the same thing Matt was saying, right? Like, nothing's more frustrating from a labor standpoint and a morale standpoint than getting something back and being like, this is so crappy. Like, I spent all this time and they can't get it right. And then that's when your relationships start to get a little rocky in your supply chain, right? So I think that's, it's super important that it's exact. And I guess the flip side of it too is like, this, Matt, is why we work with key partners and factories to make sure they can actually replicate that and bring it to life. But Matt, do you have any input on the digital? I know you've worked a lot.
I can talk all day about anything, but yeah, I absolutely have input. And you guys just made me think of something that I don't normally think of, because usually with all of my customers, I'm so heads down in the development and design process, right? That's really where we live. That's our bread and butter. But when we're talking about the configurator, like if you are using and you're doing some kind of mass customization or whatever the buzzword is you want to call for that. So an end user, an actual customer, and let's talk about the actual customer for a minute, that'd be weird, goes on your website and configures a shoe. And so what you're using XPV or whatever, there's a couple of them out there, right? That, and I just know the XPV one because it's cool, because you can spin stuff around and make cool changes on the consumer side. If the data that went into that was garbage, then the customer is not going to get what they thought they ordered. But if you're starting, and it's like building a house, if your foundation is right, the fabric scans were right, the 3D CAD was right, the 3D model building for the last and the tooling was right, then odds are much better that the final product is going to be right. If you go into there and you're guessing at any step, odds are not good that the customer is going to get what they want. And then you're paying for returns and you've got an unhappy customer. And that's just that's not even what today's about. You made me think of it when you were talking about it. You're only as good as the data you have.
Yeah. And I think let's get into the design and development. And then I definitely want to bring in sustainability as a topic as well around this, because I think that, obviously sustainability is one of the biggest challenges we have in an industry, and more hot topic that we discuss. But let's talk a little bit about, the workflow around this, because, it's, people are already doing the work plugging in Excel, right? They're plugging in Excel. They're already having to manage materials, and they're sending around spec sheets, and they're emailing people all day. And so the challenge I have is when we're talking about digital transformation, is that somebody imagines that their job is going to be so much worse, or it's going to get so much harder. And I just pause for a minute and be like, do you know how terrible Excel looks and functions? Like, I always say, like, it's the greatest tool that anybody's created to this point for managing things, right? It's an amazing thing, but you got people who are working on this stuff every day who are just plugging stuff into it. It doesn't really tell you anything unless it's connected to something. And so when we're talking about like this digital revolution, yes, there are new tools and new things, but we're already doing all this work. And it seems that the work we're doing now, and you guys can both speak to this, is so minimally value compared to if you just digitize it to what you could get out of it for all those different departments. And the ease at which, the workflow starts happening, because imagine you're designing something or you're developing something and you're engineering it. Well, even if it's the same thing from the previous year, you're still going back but in a digital sample, you just pull it up and you color change and you're done for the whole season. Two flips once you have it built.
Yeah.
So I'll tee that up. That's kind of my rant when I'm talking to people. I'm just like, you don't realize, like, it's a repetitive thing. Who wants to do that in life? you're basically a machine in some sense doing this stuff, right? Why not have this to where you can actually change the colorways here or there and you're done, and then you can actually go work on something you really want to work on, something innovative and cool to add more value. So I'll throw it out to that on my rant and see what you guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's my job description right there, right? I'm a cheese mover, and we've all read Who Moved My Cheese. Read it again. It's simple. It's a fast read. Yeah, you're doing all this work. Stop doing it in a silo, in a very complicated, difficult way. Things are going to change when you bring in these digital transformation tools, but they're going to change for the better, not just for you, but for the company as a whole, because people are going to get the benefits of the work you're doing automatically. And, we can get into the psychology of the process a little bit, but I'm a big fan of milestone stage gates. So something's approved, it goes to the next step. Something's approved, it goes to the next step. One of the things I try to encourage all of my customers to do when they're implementing Centric is to make those transitions as organic as possible. Meaning, if my job is to approve a design, when I click approve, the software should be smart enough to automatically tell the developer, this is okay to develop. So the developer should have a dashboard that says, hey, you've got 3 new styles to develop. When they're done with the development process, the act of them being done should automatically transfer it. And we can apply that to anything. But once people grasp that, they get right away that their job is not going to be less valuable. It's going to be more valuable, because anytime there's change, there's fear, right? And people don't like change. I don't like change. Nobody does. So that's a big part of what we do, is help people embrace that idea. And, not to talk about Centric too much, but one of the reasons when you log into Centric, it looks like Excel, is because everybody's used to Excel, and there's no sense scaring anyone. It looks and functions like Excel. That's fine. But instead of using the spreadsheet, use the spreadsheet. But when you do it in this spreadsheet, everybody knows what you did automatically. You don't have to tell them, because it goes through that milestone. And that's the beginning of my rant on that. That's a big topic.
I think it's super smart to have that, because people are already using it. So why change it? Even though the back end is connecting it where it needs to. And then I think, Andrew, too, from a technical expertise standpoint, what you just said at the very beginning is very important, to where you're basically like, you can buy this and you can scan it yourself. We can scan it for you. There's third parties that can scan it. Like, there's plenty of people who have been doing this long enough to where if you start to dip your toe in, you're not going to put money and you're not going to trip up, right? People have the understanding now of the workflow and outline.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to add a little bit more to that, getting into just resistance to change, if maybe you've been doing those sketches for years, right? You're a designer, or, that's just how you work, right? You're working on sketches and faxing or email these designs around and stuff, and you're going back and forth. You're just used to the cadence of working like that, working physically. Maybe you're also doing some physical prototyping, putting stuff together. If you've never worked on the digital side, it can definitely be a bit daunting too, right? Because it's just you're just being removed from your comfort zone. So like you said, there's plenty of help out there. So the people that are new to 3D, the ones that are most successful when they're jumping in, they are utilizing the help that's available. So whether it's utilizing us to help with those initial processes on the material digitization side of things, or letting us, and Centric has plenty of 3D partners in general to help on the modeling side, if you need some help jumping into that. We've also seen it's very, very common now with 3D really reaching maturity in the last 10 years or so in many different industries. You're getting more and more people coming out of schools and universities with the proper skill set to do all of this work very well, very efficiently. What they don't have yet is all of that experience with, building a shoe properly. I think it was mentioned a little earlier, right? Like this is the trouble anytime you're working in 3D for any industry, but you can know how to work in 3D and make something that looks nice, but you need the veteran support that can tell you, no, you can't actually do this in reality, right? If we send this to manufacturing, this isn't going to work. So I think while, you can be resistant to change, I think if you mesh the two worlds together, not throwing anything out on either side, right? But kind of meet in the middle there, you end up getting the best of both worlds. And then the veteran designers really start seeing that rapid iteration you can do, right? Like, oh, I want to change this, and it's click, click, click. Oh, here it is. This is what it looks like, with that change. So a lot of resistance to change, but I think there's plenty of ways to minimize the effects of that.
And I feel like there's even, we talk about tech stacks, right? So even if you pick one thing and just start with one area and you scan your materials in just so you can see them, because that's the other thing is, like, if you just think about Vizu and what they're doing just to scan materials into one area, then you don't have that. And this is the point to Matt's point. You don't have a lot of people going into the office anymore to the material library flipping through books. It just doesn't happen. And even if you did, and you were like, I'm on page 42 of ISA 10 textbook from 2016, and everybody's like, what is that? I have no idea. Well, I'll take a picture on my phone and send it to you. Be like, your thumb was over the, but if you're in a work system and you're all looking at the same thing, that all of a sudden becomes valuable just in and of itself. Not a full tech stack of scanning material and a full 3D, where using browseware or whatever it is, or Python or Romans CAD and pattern making. Like, just start there and just say, what can we optimize in this little space? But then it still goes back to, you need that point of truth where you're all looking at the same thing in the same system. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to buy everything. You can start in strategic places and build your journey through that. And this is the other point too, and Matt and I've talked about this past, there's a fear of money and capital investment. Your ROI comes really quickly. And I'll let you guys both talk about that, but it comes a lot faster than you think, because in some ways you can't properly calculate the time waste that you see. So Matt, I see you shaking.
I mean, you just made me think of something else there, because if you're scanning your materials at the very beginning, so in any organization, you've got, whether you know it or not, you've got a materials manager. Somebody is managing those materials, right? And, some people don't even realize that that's what they're doing. But if you're making decisions on what materials you're going to use, you're managing those materials. If you start from the beginning by scanning them, that gives you the opportunity to have a materials management process. So, for example, in Centric, you could have a very easy validation rule that says approved or not approved. And if it's not approved yet, because it hasn't gone through your factory vetting, your vendor vetting, your ESG process, your crocking, whatever tests you want, wherever you set that bar, then the designers can't even see it. But if they can see it, then they can use it, and they have accurate physics and scans and everything. It only takes, I can remember those rooms of the books of all the materials from every vendor. It only takes one person taking a new product really far down the path with a book that the vendor disavowed 2 years ago, but didn't tell anybody. And everyone I used to have written in my office, remember is not procedure. No one remembered to tell you to throw that book away. And all of a sudden, things are getting wrong. Solve one of those. That's a big chunk of your ROI, right? Especially if you've opened molds, because that's always, I hate opening molds unless everything's perfect, because that's where you spend a lot of money. What a great opportunity to not do that anymore.
Yeah, I can add a bit more just to what Andy was saying too about, starting small, start with one project, that sort of thing, right? Not biting everything off at the same time. But yeah, if we're talking about starting with materials, as mentioned, you can digitize that closet full of materials for everyone to have easy access to. Even if you don't get into 3D right away, Our software has a built-in rendering feature that can output a photorealistic render using some pre-built scenes. So you don't have to know anything about 3D. You capture it, render it out. We have a connection to Centric. You can upload all your assets as you're digitizing these and adding your previews and all that stuff. And yeah, and just start with creating a digital library that's easily accessible, globally, just wherever you need it, it's there. And yeah, don't even have to know anything about 3D to start.
And you can let experts be experts, right? Because too often we all try to take on, especially, these modern times, for lack of a better word, we all feel like we have to be experts at everything. And Andrew, to your point earlier, you don't. There's so much help out there. You just have to have the courage to say, I want to do this, but I don't know where to start. And the experts will show up.
We've been talking a little bit about it because we've been talking about cutting out sample waste and things like that, but let's lean a little bit more into sustainability in 3D and how one supports the other. So Matt, if you want to jump in on that real quick, then we'll go to Andrew.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts about that. I mean, sustainability can mean a lot of different things, right? Whether it's less samples means less shipping, whether it's less damage to the earth through your material creation process, there's so many things. So one of the big, easy, like low-hanging fruit ways to be more sustainable is something we've already talked about. Let's do less turns for development samples. Let's find out how we can make smarter decisions sooner, because the waste of FedExing shoes around the world just to open the box and say nope and throw it in the shredder is immense. If you can take one or two of those out, I think that's a easy first goal. On top of that, you can start doing things. I've got customers that are working on digitally, once you have accurate models, digitally packaging things better. Like, how much air do I not have to ship? Because I hate shipping air across the ocean, right? And if things are packaged efficiently, maybe the shoes fit better this way. I mean, there's experts who are great at this, but you need the real data to do that. Because if I can go from 4 containers to 2.5, that's less waste, it's less money, it's less time, it's less everything. Those are just a couple of things I can think of off the top of my head. You can reuse things. Check it out. I just realized. Co-customer, Keen. Can you see that? Oh, I'm reusing my outdoor retailer beer mug for water. So,
Andrew, do you have any thoughts on the sustainability aspect that you guys see and work on?
Yeah, I mean, really, it is the bottom line is, as you do more things digitally, there's just less things you have to do in the physical world, which does reduce everything. It cascades down, right? So, I mean, just as an example, it's an older article now, but Vizoo actually got its start from Adidas. The founders came out of Adidas, but that's a reason we have a close partnership with, or they're close clients of ours. But anyway, basically, I don't remember the year the article was from, but this is a public article, so we can talk about it. But when Adidas implemented their digital processes to try to reduce the number of sales samples that they were utilizing, because those are things that get sent out, like you were saying, Matt, and they'll just be tossed out. When people are done with them or whatever, they might be recycled, but still, there's all of the other things that go into it, the manufacturing and all that. But so just to put a tangible number on it, I think it was over a 3-year period, they were able to reduce the number of sales samples, the number of physical sales samples by like 1 million or something like that. So we're talking big numbers here. It's not just 1 or 2. It really does make a big difference when you can have a 3D version, or that digital twin of your shoe. And yeah, maybe you send out a single sample in one colorway, right? That they can just physically look at, they could try it out, whatever, the things that you can't do digitally, feel it, that sort of thing. And then you display or show all the other variants digitally. That's It just is kind of exponential as far as the increase in sustainability and savings that you get off of that.
I think people don't realize how many samples are created to bring a product to market until they really start sitting down and doing the math. It's tremendous.
Yep.
And I think too, even beyond that is like, once you have all those tools and, obviously you run Fanny Market Week now in New York and we have all these showrooms, we go and visit and look and it's stacked with samples, right? And like most of them won't make it. But what if you had a tablet there where you could go through the samples? To your point, like maybe you need one or two, change the colorway, show what they are. And if you have an advanced 3D program, and I think this is where more advanced companies in the 3D space are at, you can start to change the color with the client sitting there at the table, or change a mesh out to a leather. And the system then sends the bill of materials back to the PLM and adjusts everything in real time. Meaning you don't have to write down, they want the leather mesh. That already changed for that client. The client has a list there and it changes. And all of a sudden it changes for the development team. And the development team, to Matt's point, hits the button and says, that just got ordered and it already got changed and we verified it and just ship it straight to the factory. We don't need to get an email or a handout after the B2B trade show with a stack of papers we got to go through and make changes physically and waste all that time. It's already ordered. And that's
So what if you had a PLM solution that could create a on-demand virtual catalog that could do exactly that on the showroom floor? Yeah, call me up. We do it right now. It's amazing. And we've got people using it. It's once you have, and again, it all comes down to the data. And once you have the right data in the system, you can do things so fast. It's amazing.
And you make sure it doesn't fall through the cracks where somebody didn't send the email, didn't give you the piece of paper.
Forgot the sticky fell off the catalog, right?
Or somebody's handwriting, which is like mine, looks like a doctor and you can't even read what it is. It just sits in there and you know it and you flow back and forth. And the other part of that too is, and this is more advanced thought, but as you work with those retail customers in your showroom, over time, it builds the pattern of what their clients are and how you can better build models to meet what they're looking for. So you sell more. So instead of them buying 3, they're buying 6 different styles. But it only happens if you understand what you're looking at. And there's a moment in our industry where I think gut is very important in life, but the data has to be there too, because it tells us things we don't know. Sometimes we don't even know what to ask and the data can tell us. Like, that's really interesting, right? So we need both things in that instance, but you can't get it to these advanced levels of optimization unless you have solid foundations and systems and people who understand it. And to the whole point we just said, you start small, you implement it step by step, you use experts who have already done this. This is not a new thing for the people implementing it. And then you figure out how to align your teams within these systems and tools. And that is digital transformation. It is not the conversation 5 years ago than today would be much different.
Yes.
Much different. But today you have people who know what to do, know what not to do, as well as you implement and fold the stuff in. And if you're not building it now, if not now, never. So we'll get to some questions. If you have questions as we go through this stuff, and again, we can talk more in depth and sideways and forward, but I'll tell you, all this stuff is not pie in the sky. This is really happening. Either companies are just starting, with, what we're talking about with scanning a material or doing this or using that little thing to optimize. It's already happening. And companies are already advanced in terms of, Matt's even said they got customers already using it where they change something on the showroom floor and it already goes back. This is already happening. These are not, things that we're just conjuring up, although I love to conjure things. We do have a question. It's, does Vizu do digital color management?
Color, not in the sense of like color verification. We do accurately reproduce colors, but we're not creating that, like the color library and that sort of thing. We do have processes that we've put in place for making sure your colors are accurate, like verification processes, and we do consult with clients on those sorts of processes, if that's what the question is getting at there.
Yeah, I think that I think what it is like, I think they're saying is your tool like something they can go in and change and transform the scan. And I think, you know, kind of what Visu's brilliant at is getting it right. So you can pull that into another program, and you can do the Pantone and all that kind of stuff and other systems once you have it, but you want something that's actually accurate in your library.
I mean, on our end, it would be pretty easy if you're scanning a material and presumably you know the Pantone code. That's just an attribute for us. We just tie the two together. It's not a verification per se, but it's an accurate representation that ties back to something you could use. That's pretty easy.
And we do have tools built in to recolor fabrics as well. So if you have different patterns or colorways of a fabric, right, you capture one, the software can split out those colors, and you can pick manually or bring in Adobe color swatches, and then again, make a change, upload that to Centric, just all that stuff. Yeah, we can definitely work with colors in that way.
If there's more questions at the bottom, you can just type them in the Q&A and we'll get to those. So I know that was a question that came up, so we answered that one. I would say too, as you get into this and start figuring out, like there's also like third-party 3D design firms that you can contract with to build your models. My caution is that you retain the design rights and the IP around that, but you still need all that data in your own system. It doesn't mean that they're going to maintain it, store it, and it's not going to be useful. Those are quick ways to advance, and they can work at the start, but overall, like, and I always tell people this in terms of innovation, you have to grind through some of this to learn how it works so that you can fully optimize it. There's not a real shortcut around this stuff. You just have to dive in and start somewhere in this process and learn what's good and what's bad. And for some companies, culturally, it's not going to work, or product wise, it may not work, but there's parts that will. So you may not build a full 3D digital system from end to end, but one thing can save you $1 million a year if you do it right. So, all right, we had another question coming in. You guys talk a lot about starting with the value and creating digital textile library, Pantone's accuracy. It's a different conversation for dress shoe companies are dealing mainly with using leathers, different finishes on leathers. We use the same base leather many times over, but the colors and finishes change. How does your offering come into play with dress shoe companies? So how do you deal with something where it's over and over again? It's typically the same model, maybe just colorways getting flipped and changed. And Matt, you can get into this as well, but when I look at this, your material changes every single season. It's not the same leather every single season, meaning like your compliance data, your audit data, your sustainability data, because one season you may use more water than the next season. All these different attributes around your materiality matter for your PLM and your compliance system. So yes, when we're talking about 3D tools and scanning different things, it's beyond that. It's the data points that you have from your leather that you're actually using seasonality to optimize to make sure that it's compliant, that there's no forced labor, and it doesn't get held up at the port. But also just remember too, like every single season, maybe it is the same style and same leather from the same supplier, but every season, material suppliers send out these new books, and you look at the new books and you don't know whether it's updated or not. So if you were going to make a change or a shift, you don't have that in your library, and that could be a problem down the road. Because I can tell you what people have traditionally done in this industry, and it will no longer work, is hire an agent to run it for you. And because of Forced Labor Provision Act, you actually have to know down to the tannery and eventually down to the cattle herd and the farm, the ranch it came from, what that product is coming from. And there's no way that you can do it in Excel. And there's no way you can manage all those changes and shifts. So you can think that it's one piece of leather, but it's one piece of leather on one shoe for one season, and every season is different. And I think that's really what we have to think about in that process. But in the same way, if you had your digital mold and you had your digital files, then it's consistent if you have to leave China. If you leave China and try to find somewhere else in Vietnam, you're going to have problems with quality control for a long time. Whereas if you had a digital 3D model and went to a factory that understood what those things are in Vietnam, Cambodia, and India, if they have that, you have a lot better chance of flipping your supply chains and being agile than just moving it over and hoping for the best. So that's my 2 cents, Matt, and Andrew can chime in as well.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I'm not a leather expert. In my past, I'd call that a carryover new material. And you'd start with the material development process as if it was a new product, but the last is done, the tooling is done. So your heavy lifting is done, but leathers vary so much. I mean, if you've ever torn a seat in your car and tried to get it fixed, the first thing the leather guy tells you is, I don't know, we'll take a look, see what we can do, but it's a different cow, right? So the leather people would know more than I. And Andrew, I don't know if there's what you guys would do on your end with the scanning.
I mean, just a couple points to that. I mean, yes, we scan leathers. It's not just fabrics, but yeah, it's pretty much any material that you would use to make any product we can capture. So yeah, leathers are not a problem. We have, looking at the way, okay, sorry, just stepping back, because there were a couple parts to that question about, like, I think it was, as opposed to creating an existing or like a static library, it is different all the time, like different finishes all the time. That's what you were just saying, Andy, there. But that doesn't, you can use our system to create a library that's static. We have a lot of clients that they've got base like platform materials, right? Where they just, they use these same X number of materials every year, but then they also have new materials for every season or, every year that are coming in. So it'd be the same for leathers. If it's a different finish, then capture that one too. The capture process does not take a very long time. We're a very fast system. So you can have a seamless material ready to put on a 3D model in less than 10 minutes in many cases. So yeah, it's very quick. So yeah, it doesn't matter if you're using the same materials over and over, you need to build a library, or if you're just always using new things, you could still plug our system into those processes and have it be really efficient.
Yeah. And I would, again, it goes back to the point where for dress shoes, you may not need a full 3D system for that. If you're running the same style SKU every year, okay, then you look at what tools are available to optimize where you need to optimize. So it may not be the sampling area that you need to optimize. It could be somewhere else in your supply chain. But I can tell you the data points within that supply chain have to live somewhere. That's where PLM becomes vital.
Yep.
And it's not, 5 years ago, we would have said, oh, PLM, that's really good because it can help us save money and speed up time. And now it's like, yeah, PLM and systems, you have to have it because there's no way you can control all those points across the supply chain. So it's regulatory impact there. So I'm not seeing any more questions come in. We've covered a lot today. I thought it was really dynamic and it was a lot of fun. I always allow kind of last words to our panelists to cover anything else that you can think of that we may not have covered before we wrap this up. Is there anything else that you want to touch on or lean into?
I mean, I think we hit a lot today. right? It's always about digital transformation, going back to when we first got fax machines. That was a digital transformation of the staticky phone call into something you could read. We're just further down the path now, but it's, for us, the secret is, and I think you've both said this, you got to find your pain point. You don't have to solve it all today, but find what needs to be solved, jump in, and then work your way through the rest of the process as you go.
Andrew?
Yeah. I think the main thing is, yeah, don't be afraid to try these things out. There's lots of support out there in like Centric, in ourselves, and there's lots of different companies out there that are willing to help you jump into whatever that first thing that you want to try is. And yeah, just try to be future minded, right? Think long term when it comes to making investments in systems and services like this. And yeah, that's about all I have to add.
Awesome. All right. Well, as we wrap up today, I will drop this in and I encourage you to reach out to Matt to talk more about what we were talking about today in terms of any of the tools and technologies and optimizations. And of course, he can also connect you to Vizu, so you can talk to them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Scanning and libraries and things like that. But there's Matt's info. And if you're writing it down really quickly and you don't get it, you can always just email info@fdra.org, and we're happy to send you over to Matt and to Andrew at Vizu, so you can connect with them. And again, I always tell people, do it now. Start the conversation now. Don't do it when you need it, because it's too late. So start now. And I thought the question was really good about, like, we've got this one style and one thing. And I think that's what these guys are looking for is, okay, like, what's your challenge? And do we fit in that challenge? And if we don't, that's fine. But more than likely, we do have a solution that can help you save a lot of money and hopefully make a better product and make a better business. So definitely reach out and just talk to them about that and go through that. But again, Andrew, thanks for joining us today from South Carolina. I love it. I love Greenville. Greenville's a great place. Visit there many, many times. I have lots of friends there. And Matt, as always, it's great to see you. I hope your allergies are a lot better. I know there's been some
Better
issues.
than Monday. Yeah, I can see today. So appreciate that.
Awesome. And as always, we thank Centric for powering these conversations that help our industry think a little bit more in depth and more innovatively about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and of course, how we can do it better. If FDRA can help in any way on any of your supply chain needs, sustainability needs, etc., please let us know. We are great facilitators. We know the experts. We know who to point you to. So just drop us a line if we can help with that. But I hope everybody has a great afternoon or morning or evening. I see some folks from Europe on here. So it's great to see you all. And until next time, go back to fdra.org. Look up events. You can see upcoming webinars. We got one on AI coming up that's free. We have a sustainability summit that's coming up that Matt will be speaking at in Portland in September, focusing on that in particular. So take a look and see if there's something that piques your interest. Please join us. Always great to bring footwear folks together, footwear family together. All right. So Andrew and Matt, thank you again so much. It's great to see you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Have a great day. All right. Bye-bye.